Hi, welcome to another episode of Shielded Voices. On this episode, we've got Matt. Matt's a 20-year law enforcement veteran, former SWAT operator, narcotics liaison, senior defensive tactics instructor, field training officer. He's received some pretty awesome awards with the agency that he works with. One of them not so awesome, but it's a Purple Heart, and then he's also received a Distinguished Service Award. I have known Matt for 15 years. Him and I have been what we refer to as district wives for a number of years. Quite honestly, Matt and I are best friends. I know a lot about this guy. He knows a lot about me and pretty much everything. So I would say, look, man, buckle up. This episode's going to get deep. We probably will go maybe 2 to 3 episodes. It's going to be long. Matt's got a lot to talk about. One of the cool things that Matt's doing, he's the founder of Blue Line Golf. He's created a unique nonprofit organization, uses the power of mindfulness in the game of golf to support the mental health of active and retired law enforcement officers. I can tell you from firsthand experience, it has absolutely changed my life. If it wasn't for this guy and the organization that he does and forcing me to just get out of my house during times, and when I say forcing me, I mean literally showing up at my house and saying, get your ass out, let's go, and taking me golfing, it's done a lot of things for me. So, Matt, welcome.
Hi, guys. It's nice to see you again.
We are excited for you to be here.
Oh,
super
great.
Stoked.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. Just to reiterate, for everybody that's listening, we're only going to use first names, and we will not use agency names. If for some reason you hear some weird edits, it's because we slipped up. These are 3 guys that have known each other for years, so we're going to talk pretty candidly, pretty open. So just be aware of that. So, Matt, let's just jump right in, dude. I met you. You taught my reserve academy as a defensive tactics instructor, if you remember that.
They all blend together. I've taught a few of those, and a lot of people come up to me. Don't you remember when you taught me these things? And they've all lumped together. It's been kind of a wild ride over the last 20 years, and it's kind of hard for me to remember specifics like that.
Yeah.
Unless you did something dumb, and then that might stick.
Well, come on, man. We all know me, right? I mean, let's be honest. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I actually today, after church, I had a guy come up to me after church, and he's like, Rogers, and I'm looking at this kid, and I'm like, man, I know his face, and I can't. I'm like, how do I know you, brother? And I won't say his last name. First name was Victor, jail deputy. As soon as he said his last name, he's like, you taught my recruit academy, and I'm like, oh, and we've been going to church together for a year and a half and never knew it. So things like that, you say they'll blend together, right? But such an awesome feeling for you to know that you've had an impact on, I mean, God knows how many recruits over your 20-year careers as an instructor, as an FTO. So let's start off, man. You grew up in Oregon, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah. Law enforcement family?
Yes. My dad was a law enforcement officer for his entire career, several different agencies, and growing up when I was really young, my mom was an ER nurse, and so I grew up with a very different outlook on the world of what we talked about as families, and what I was allowed to do and not allowed to do. I wasn't allowed to go out on people's boats on the Columbia River because my dad had pulled bodies out of that river, and he's like, nope, you don't go, no matter what.
Sheltered, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, for obviously, he's being a parent for good reasons, but still.
Yeah, he had the best of intentions, but also at the same time, you can't control everything, and maybe there's a happy medium somewhere.
Well, kind of what I'm hearing too. I mean, obviously, from what we all know, the 3 of us with our careers. I mean, Mitch is married to a dispatcher. Mitch comes from a firefighter family. I come from a military family. You were raised law enforcement nurse. I mean, it's like trauma was in our DNA. You know what I mean? Right from the get-go, trauma's in our DNA. And we don't even realize it because it's just how we grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's a fair statement for you, right? Looking back?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess when I was a little kid, I didn't really think about it all that much of that I was all that much different than from everyone else. It just, my trauma actually kind of began when I was about 11, 12 years old. And growing up in a law enforcement family didn't help that. it was around the death of my grandparents. They both died within about 6 months of each other. And
wow.
My dad and his siblings got into a pretty big heated fight about certain things of like who was going to care for grandma, if she was going to be in the house or be in a care home. And my mom and dad caught one of my uncles kind of stealing money from grandma and paying for 24-hour care. And the 24-hour care also came with sexual favors for him. And they caught on to that, and so they put a stop to it. They actually moved grandma out when my uncle was out of town. And that kind of set off this huge cascade of anger and bitterness, with one of my aunts getting drunk, calling the FBI in the middle of the night to come and arrest my dad. And the trauma really started that I noticed is we were watching TV one night, and my dad got a phone call, and my mom answered the phone and handed him the phone, and he never talks on the phone. And my dad was just like, yeah, okay. Thank you, sir. I'll take that under advisement, and handed the phone back to my mom and hung up. And she's like, what's that about? Oh, that's my brother. And if grandma's not back in her house, we'll all be dead by morning. And he just kind of went on like nothing happened, like it didn't even faze him. And
you're 11, 12 at this point?
I'm 11 or 12. So
and you're being told, sisters. Like, are you sitting there, or are they telling you about all this at 11 and 12?
Well, it started with me sitting in the room when that happened. Like I was sitting like 5 feet from my dad and watched that all go down. And so, yeah, I'm 11. I have two younger sisters, so they were roughly 9 and 7 at that time. And then after that did prompt quite a few talks about it. And I guess from what I've been told, it got hairy enough to the schools were all alerted that no one was allowed to pick us up. The neighbors all knew about it. And it just kind of spiraled, and it kind of came to what I realized what was really going on like 20 some years later. Instead of watching Steve Urkel on Friday nights, I was getting a crash course lesson in revolvers and how to do a contact shot at 11 years old.
In case Uncle showed up. Wow. Yeah, I mean, like I played G.I. Joe. I don't know what Mitch did, because Mitch is only 15 now, so.
I'm 30, motherfucker. Dumbass.
We're not editing that part.
So for what you're saying, Brian, like, I think there's some level of trauma growing up in that kind of environment. And then mine just kind of like got the pedal pushed down at a very young age. Like 11-year-olds aren't supposed to be dealing with that stuff.
No.
Part of me is like, I had to be prepared in case it did happen. It was a real threat. And now I'm paying the consequences of things like that, even still to this day.
And I got to ask, when we can kind of, I mean, it's totally up to you, man. Like this is your time, right? Like we've said before, just to kind of reiterate, this is a safe place for people to tell their story. Our hope is that your story is going to touch somebody in some way, right? You know what I mean? Like you and I both know we've had those experiences. You and I've had hours and hours and hours of talks, but if us telling our story can touch somebody in some way to make them maybe have an awakening or talk to somebody, you know, that's awesome. So I mean, I have to ask though, like at that 11 or 12 years old, was there ever any resolution with your uncle, or did it just kind of fizzle out, or what happened?
After my grandma passed away a couple months later, all the finances got taken care of, and I think I saw my uncle briefly at grandma's funeral for like 10 seconds and then never saw him again. And he died. Right. I don't know. I was well past. I was probably in my 30s when he died. Hadn't seen him.
Your uncle did. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So yeah, he kind of became very estranged to the family, and I
were there any emotions when he passed?
Good. Is good an emotion?
Like burn in hell kind of thing?
Yeah.
I mean, no such thing as a false emotion, right?
Yeah, it was just like I was pretty indifferent to it, but also like good.
That's one thing I've talked about before is we're comfortable with death. But when someone has that much of an impact on us, then they pass, and it's just kind of like a whatever kind of thing.
Right. Mm-hmm. So even that, so you've got Her mom was a nurse, and you got how many siblings?
Two.
Two, both sisters.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a dad is a lifetime cop, retired. And then why in God's green earth? Why did you want to become a cop, man? After seeing all that, or was it just one of those things where like because it's for lack of a better term in your DNA, right? Because of where you came from.
It kind of started with being able to go on a ride along with my dad and see what he does. At the time, he was working for the Portland airport. That's where he did the last like 17, 18 years of his career. And so I got to see him out and about, moving around, not stuck in an office, kind of just this immense freedom when he wasn't called to do something, just to go and do whatever needs to get done. And so I was really drawn to helping people, having that kind of autonomy. And let's also face it was cool. We're watching 80s cop movies and Rambo.
Right.
It was all glorified. It was super cool. And so I'm in middle school getting to go on ride-alongs and do ride-alongs to the Lake Graveyard with my dad. And then when I was in high school, I did my senior project with him while he was on the bomb squad. So I got to go hang out with FBI explosive guys, Navy SEALs that were teaching the bomb squad, and
holy shit,
be there while he was like getting to blow shit up. And it was super cool. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of things I can do here. And that's kind of how I got on this path.
So you're a kid in high school, and you're talking, say 16 years old, you're doing graveyard ride-alongs in the city of Portland, and your dad's on. I didn't even know this about. I didn't know your dad was on the bomb squad, and your dad plays with explosives. Like, how badass is that?
It's pretty badass. So he was. I got to correct you. He was at the Port of Portland. He was an airport.
Port of Portland. Okay.
So we're hanging out at the airport in graveyard shift. And yeah, he was on EDU for a number of years, and so that was always super cool to hear stories and get to go on training days like that. And
right. Wow. So then you graduate high school and decided you went. For those of you that don't know, this person that I'm talking to, which you don't know, this man Matt that I'm talking to is not a small person. When I say he's not small, I'm not saying he's a fatty. This is a big dude. Like, this is why I love having him on my calls. But which takes me into, you then go to college to play rugby, right?
Well, that's playing rugby happened by accident. I actually started college on an Army ROTC scholarship.
So I was right. I forgot about that.
I was on track to go through the ROTC at the University of Nevada, Reno, and
be a fucking officer. God, I'm glad you didn't do that.
Right.
Really at it.
My career path really changed like about 2 weeks before I moved down to Reno. My scholarship was all approved and it was all said and locked in. I'm like, oh, this is great. And 2 weeks before I moved to Reno, I got a letter from the Department of Defense of like, upon final review, you have flat feet, so no thank you. If you want to be an officer, you can enlist and try and come up through the ranks, but we're not going to take you in this program. And so I spent my entire first year of college, or my first semester, trying to fight that to see if I could get an exemption or a waiver. And that fell through. And I started playing rugby just because my first roommate in college played. And he's like, you need something to do? Let's go play rugby. You're a big kid. So I started playing rugby, and I didn't know what I was going to do because I needed a scholarship to kind of get through the second half of college, or years 3 through 4. And I came home that Christmas, and my neighbor growing up was a sergeant for the Portland Police Bureau, and he was actually a sergeant over the police corps program at the time. And so he saw me over at my parents' house and hollered over the fence at me and gave me a paper application, because that's how long ago it was. We still did paper applications. And he says, hey, we're testing over the next 2 weeks while you're home. Normally it would take several months, but if you show up and do well, I think I can get you through all the testing so you don't have to come back later in the spring.
So can you explain to people, just give kind of a brief what the police corps is?
Well, the police corps was, it's not a thing anymore, at least not on the West Coast. It was kind of like ROTC, but for police officers. It was run through the Department of Defense. And while you were in college, you got money to go to college, or you could get reimbursed after the fact. And you owed at least 4 years of the sponsoring agency after you got out of college. And so,
really?
it was, it kept my college bills very low compared to what they could have been. And yeah, my neighbor said, apply, let's see what you got. And I burned through a couple months worth of testing in a week and a half while I was home. Right. And it just kind of took off after that.
So you went, so if I'm understanding, so if you do this police corps and you have a sponsoring agency, then you're saying you have to go to work for that agency once you graduate the police corps?
Yeah.
So what agency sponsored you?
Hills Road Police Department sponsored me.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, and obviously we all know that's not who you ultimately worked for.
Correct. I failed their psych.
Okay. Yeah. That don't surprise me. That don't surprise me. I can't even believe you ever became a cop, you crazy fuck. Like, I don't understand. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I got out of the police corps academy. At that time, Oregon State Academy was like 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. And the police corps academy was 24 weeks. And we were doing 6 days a week, 12-hour days. So the program was set up to get more experienced cops on the road through this program.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually go to the normal state academy because all the police corps stuff went through DPSST and got me all the same credentials, and they send instructors up to proctor exams or teach the state defensive tactics. And so we were pretty much getting Portland's Advanced Academy on top of the state academy curriculum, and a bunch of extra things thrown in.
So for people that don't, for people that don't understand, DPSST is basically Oregon's. It's the police academy for every agency in the state. For people that may be listening to this that don't live in the state of Oregon, essentially that's what it is. So basically, this police corps replaced that. You didn't have to do that like Mitch and I had to go do. What was it? I think it was 16 weeks.
16 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, 16 weeks of the best fun in the world, said no one ever. I mean, it was a breeze. Don't get me wrong. Coming from the military was super easy. But so then you come out of police corps, try with this local city agency that sponsored you. Don't get through the psych, and then ultimately get picked up by a sheriff's office on the West Coast, right?
Correct.
And what year was that?
2004.
Oh, geez. Wow.
I swore in August 9th, 2004.
Nice. All right.
I think I was in grade school.
Right. Well, okay. Wow, dude. I mean, I think.
Yeah, I was just shy of my 24th birthday.
Okay, so you started the career pretty young,
very young,
right?
I like to joke that I fooled them. I'm 23 years old and I'm mature and I'm ready. Give me a gun.
Right.
Yeah, I was 22.
They bought it.
Yeah.
What, Mitch? You were 22?
22 when I got hired. Yeah.
See, and I've looking back on it, and I mean, you guys might not agree. For me, looking back on it, to me, the standards should change from 21 to 25. And even at that, 25, as far as the mental maturities for most, is still not knowing what we know about the career. Sure, there are perks and benefits to starting at 21, right? Your retirement and how many years you have in. But as far as at 21, you're still surprised you're getting laid. I mean, come on. That's young. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and life experience.
Girl, you know?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there's I've seen young cops get hired at about the same age, and some of them do better than others. Like for me,
sure.
I put myself through college. I lived in Japan for a summer. I was pretty self-sufficient at the time. So me at 23, almost 24, was very different than some of the kids that we've hired over the last few years that are 24, 25, are still living at home and haven't really had to go through any of those trials and tribulations yet.
Right, so, that life experience, right? Like for me personally, I went in the military 4 days after I graduated high school. Spent 8 years in the Army. Some life experience. Like I was forced to get away from home. Okay. So then you're still active law enforcement. So walk me through kind of what was your expectation, right? All the excitement that we talk about, like this is going to be the best job ever. I got this in the bag. Nothing's going to affect me, right? I mean, this is just, we get to drive fast and point guns at people.
Oh yeah, and when you're new to the career, everything's exciting. Every call is exciting. Every noise disturbance could be something exciting. And so everything I did was the best day ever.
Right? Did you have any? Did you have any calls like that one effed up call early, like when in the beginning of your career that maybe and some do, some don't. Some people don't deal with that what we call the one call for until they're a few years on. I know for me it happened within 2 or 3 weeks. Mitch said the same thing. Do you recall anything like that for you? Like maybe even during FTEP that really kind of resonates with you still?
Pretty early on, probably within the first year I was on my own. I got assigned a day shift because that's where they needed a body, and we got into a foot pursuit through from a hotel into a bunch of apartments and chased this dude all over and did a dog track. And at the end of it, we found him hiding in an apartment complex, and he had ditched a gun under the dumpster, like pretty close to where we found him. And there was kind of that realization of like, oh, that was my very first foot chase. And my very first foot chase, we found him with a loaded gun right next to him, or within like close enough. It was like, yeah, he was carrying a gun the whole time and could have actually ambushed us.
So were you as a young D, as a 24-year-old brand new, rookie cop? I mean, I can remember having those, and like that wasn't even a thought for me. It was like, hell yeah, we just chased. He had a gun, like we got him. But so was there ever that thought process, the thought process for you of like, oh shit, like that could have happened. Like he could have just ambushed me, even at 24 years old.
Oh yeah, I had both. I had the excitement of like, oh man, we got him. We got a bad guy. This is awesome. And then it was also like, he had a gun.
Yeah,
that's scary.
Yeah, man. And we don't think about that. I've told you, and I've talked about it a million times. I've done some what we call canine Corey, right? We go be the bad guy to help our canines train. And I've told every one of my recruits that they will absolutely do that at some point in their career, because being that Corey or being that bad guy helps us. For me, it gave me that perspective of the bad guy. Like when we're tracking somebody and we're running with canine and that bad guy's hunkered down, they see us coming from a mile away. A mile away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a lot of perspective for a cop. So, so let's do this. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, that was my first one of like, oh, it's real.
Right? Like this could happen. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's do this, man. We've been at this 15, 20 minutes or so. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with Shielded Voices. Yeah, go do your thing, Matt.
Hey, welcome back, Shielded Voices. We just had to take a quick break. Matt, I had one question for you that I've been wanting to ask you. And that's what kind of kicked off your law enforcement career, wanting to join law enforcement. I know that your dad was involved with that. My dad's a firefighter. My dad pushed me to be a cop. I'm just kind of curious what kicked off.
Actually, my dad told me don't be a cop. He said be a firefighter.
Interesting. Yeah.
Smart advice. That's a smart man right there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Actually, my dad didn't really push me either way towards it or against it. Actually, through most of his career, I didn't hear about any of like the troubles he went through or any of his traumas that he went through, the things that really bothered him. I didn't hear about those like at all. Nothing from him. He never shared any of that.
Yeah, same with my dad, that's interesting, because I think that if someone's pushing you to get into this career, they should at least share some of that with you.
Yeah, and like I said, my dad didn't push it, but also he was from the generation where you didn't talk about your feelings, you didn't show weakness, mental illness or PTSD wasn't even a thing. It was, he was a cop back in the 80s when if you got into a critical incident, you came to work the next day.
Well, that's what we're trying to do, right? That it's that stigma, right? I can understand like why your guys' dads didn't talk about that stuff because the stigma that's been attached to this, even now, it still is. It still is. I talk to guys all over the state, other states as well, and that stigma is still there, even though we're way ahead of where we were. That's which is what this podcast is all about, right? Shielded voices. Like, let's break the silence, right? It's time to
Yeah, it
talk
seems
about
like
it.
the younger generations are becoming more open to talking about it. It'd be nice to hear some of the stories from the old days of like when, and maybe not even the traumatic things, just some of the funny things that
Yeah,
they got away with.
like actual cop work.
Yeah, my dad didn't share any traumatic stories, but he was actually a cop in LeGrand, Oregon, which is kind of on the eastern side. And we actually have a detective friend that we work with that his dad was working for LeGrand at that time. And they got paired up together to kind of stop a bunch of burglaries that were happening, all the pizza joints in town, which is probably 2 pizza joints in all of LeGrand at the time. They're getting burglarized in the middle of the night, and it's happening. So they hold an old-fashioned stakeout.
In a pizza joint.
Oh yeah, in the stakeout, the guy said, "Hey, you're going to hide out in there and wait for someone to try and break in." Like that was the plan. The plan was get him. So the owner like leaves a pizza or 2 out for him, leaves the ovens on, and says, "Hey, I also left the CO2 running for you, so you guys can have some sodas and stuff while you wait." Well, I mean, this is the early to mid '80s, and
Right.
so what did these guys do when they got bored? They realized that the CO2 fountain also ran the beer dispenser, and they got absolutely plowed.
On duty.
on duty. I don't know who came and picked him up or how they did that, but they're like, this isn't happening, and so we're going to drink all this beer, and they did.
I love it.
And so funny things like that I'm sure they told people, and it got found out, and It was like, aha, silly boys. That shit today would get you fired.
Oh yeah. I mean, even mentioning that you want to do it would probably get you fired at this point. Like, come on. So how long were you a deputy before you started going after SWAT?
Oh, I started going after SWAT as soon as I could test.
Oh,
I think 3 or 4 years on.
Yeah. Yep.
I used to joke that I was the Happy Gilmore of SWAT tryouts because I was young and immature and very eager, and I would test kind of okay, and it was like, hey, you need some time, try again next year, and it was like, okay, got to toughen up, got to do more push-ups, got to run faster, and I tested 6, 7, 8 years in a row until I finally got out at the 10-year mark.
Yeah, and I remember those days. I remember the days when you got on when you were a new operator, because what I remember the most about it is like trying to, we're loading our cars up, and I'm like, all right, cool to see you in district. You're like, well, hold on, I got 57 other pieces of gear I have to load up still. Oh, wait, and then I got to go to the training center or wherever to get more gear. Like I'm like, yeah, no, you guys are, like pulling out of the freaking precinct and your tailpipe's dragging. There's so much crap in the back of that rig. Freaking nuts. So, how long were you on SWAT?
5 years, from 2014 to 2019.
Yeah, 5 years. And I remember a lot of hits, man. A lot of dope hits. Man, that was so much fun. The middle of the night search warrant executions with the dope teams, and just
he's part of the drug enforcement team too.
Right, as a liaison. Yeah. Yeah, Matt and
I. Those were the days. Like I probably took a couple of years off my life for lack of sleep because I was working swing shift, getting off at 11, going home, taking a nap, getting up at 2 for a 3 a.m. hit. Yeah. It was quite a ride, but like those were some of the best memories of having a very loud wake up call for all the tweakers in our area. At like 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, and then the sun's barely coming up, and I'm in my car driving home, and I'm like, man, this is awesome.
This is the best. Explosively breaching doors. I know, sitting back watching you guys was so awesome. For the record, I was not a SWAT operator. I was one of the investigators sitting back while you guys blew the door off and then filled the fucking house with OC. And guess who's got to go in the house when you guys are done? This guy.
You, Brian.
Fucking
Yes.
horrible.
Well, Matt, I do have one question for you. How do roles like SWAT and your involvement with drug enforcement impact your perspective on stress management and your emotional well-being?
How do they impact my stress management? I don't know. Getting on SWAT was actually very stressful. I worked really hard for a very long time. And that's an interesting assignment in our area because it's a collateral duty team. It's not your full-time assignment. So I am working patrol and teaching and also on SWAT. And I found myself constantly checking my work phone, my work email, constantly listening to what detectives were saying, if they were tracking anyone with any homicide warrants, that if we find them over the weekend, we're getting called out.
When you say constantly, this is on and off duty.
Oh, yeah. This is 10, 15, 20
24/7.
times a day. And then when an on-duty call came and just the on-duty guys would respond, I'd start monitoring the radio, waiting to see if they were going to call the full team.
All while on your day off, trying to have dinner with your wife and spend time with your kids, but you're still invested in the job at the same time.
Yep.
That's a problem, right?
It can be. Some people have a different circumstance. Mine was extra stressful because I tried so hard for such a long time to make it. I didn't want to let anybody down. And I was divorced shortly after getting on the team. Like, I think I told my ex that I wanted a divorce, like right about the time I made probation. And so my last
probation on SWAT.
Yeah. My last 3 to 4 years on SWAT were as a single dad.
Do you think being on SWAT had obviously there's like it takes two, right? Marriages work or they don't. We kind of talked about this in our last podcast with my own circumstance, but do you think not only as a cop, but I imagine in those days, this is when we were on graveyard, because you're still not enough seniority to pull the good shifts with good days. So you're working shift work with shitty days off. Now you're an operator doing call outs. Do you think that played into your personal life?
I'm sure it did some. I mean, it's not an easy assignment. It's not an easy career field. It takes a lot of extra work in the relationship. But I'm unsure to what level it impacted my marriage at the time, because when I left, we'll just say that I found out some things that had been going on that like, yep, we're done.
We're done.
And I remember struggling for 6-8 months before that. And not really understanding what was going on. And the whole time I was hearing, you have PTSD, you're mentally ill, you're crazy. Mm-hmm. And there's some truth to that. Mm-hmm. But it was all kind of put on me, and I was gaslit, and she didn't take any responsibility for her part. Mm-hmm. And so that was a really hard time. And actually, when I realized I was having problems in that marriage, I broke. I cracked. Yeah. I had been on the job for about 10 or 12 years at the time. I'd been on the domestic violence team for 2 or 3 years, and I went to a training class. It was forensic experiential trauma interview for interviewing victims of trauma. And it was like a multi-day class, and it was intense. And that was the very first time I heard about vicarious trauma. I'd never heard that term before. So I'm sitting there in this class listening to these stories of domestic violence, like the most horrible things that people can do to each other, and feeling sick to my stomach, and then hearing about, hey, you have to show empathy. You have to get down on their level. You have to kind of share that experience a little bit. And then there's vicarious trauma. And I remember sitting in the class and hearing that word and going, fuck, throwing my pencil down. And I started crying at the table, and I barely kept it together. As soon as the class was over on that last day, I left. I drove home, and I got inside and I just laid on the floor and started crying, saying, I can't be a cop anymore. I'm fucking done.
Can't do it.
And it was the very next day, she said, oh, by the way, I've been looking at apartments. The kids and I are going to move out.
Mm. So
and up until that point,
a lot at once.
Yes. And up until that point, I didn't think there was any problems, or at least none to that level. I was like, yeah, a relationship takes work. I mean, everything could get better, but I had zero idea that was even on the horizon at all. And it went from, hey, I think things are going good to I broke. I can't get off the ground. I'm crying too hard. And oh, by the way, I'm leaving you.
Yeah. That's a lot, man. That's a lot.
Sure.
To take at once. And I remember this was about the point where you and I really started becoming friends was during that time period of your life is when we'd work graveyard together. But it was kind of like I don't know for me whether it was all part of God's planning or the universe or whatever somebody wants to believe in, but I do remember some very, very in-depth conversations you and I would have in the equipment room, where you're broken, man. Like that's just you were broken. And
after she said that she was wanting to move out and get her own apartment with kids, we actually started seeing a marriage counselor, and that summer was pretty rough. It was pretty dicey. So about 6 months later is when everything was out on the table, and I left. I said, yeah, I'm done. I'm out. You no longer get a choice. I'm leaving you. I had to take a month off work. I couldn't function. I couldn't eat. I could sleep a little bit. I could take all kinds of naps, but like I really spent an entire month, if I wasn't seeing my kids on the weekends, doing nothing but riding my bike like 50 to 60 miles a day, just trying to burn off any stress I could.
Wow. I couldn't even, I'm a pretty fit dude, but riding a bike, ain't no way, man. It's no way my legs would be down. And I do remember that. I do remember when you started doing that. It's crazy how, even in life, whether you do this career or not, right? It's the ebbs and flows of the ups and downs. The difference is for people like us in this job, even though if we've got stuff going on in our personal life, we have to be able to go to work and put on this smile and quite honestly be a friggin' robot, because if you're not, you get complaints filed on you. Well, then when you get complaints filed on you, and I'm not saying this about our agency, I will say agencies in general, they don't give a flying fuck. They don't give a shit, because regardless of what you're going through, you got to put on this smile in this face to make them look good. And that's just the reality of it. That's just the way it is. The public perception is the single most important thing to police agencies these days. And it's horrible. And cops are burning out, man.
I remember early on hearing from a lot of cops, a lot of my mentors, like they describe the agency as a machine, and the machine has no feeling. The machine wants to keep itself going. Don't get too close to the machine, because eventually it'll grab you and it'll suck you in. It's absolutely true, and it's not the loyalty to the agency that gets you through. It's actually like your friends that take care of you.
Exactly. Yep.
I remember there's a couple of times that like certain people like came to my head, like you guys have for sure, but early on when I was going through some struggles, calling up the sergeant and being like, I don't have it today. And he knew what was going on with what was going on in my life at that time. And he was like, yep, no questions asked, and just dropped a 6-foot for me. And I like, those kind of things really helped, because I didn't have to worry about perception. He's like damn near ordered me not to come to work.
Yep. Yeah, we had good bosses as far as the line level supervisors, right? I can also
the human ones we have.
Human ones. Yep. Yeah. There are some good, but just like we talked about before, there's good and bad in every profession. It's not just cop work. It's a different. For us, it's just different. We could beat that to death, but I also remember, and I know you do too, back in the graveyard days, former commander, I remember him coming into briefing and literally telling us all, "You're nothing but a fucking number, and I'll replace you tomorrow." Remember that?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And back then he could get away with saying it because
Yeah.
like, we were
Yeah.
testing 2,000 or 3,000 people for 10 spots, and now no one wants to be a cop, and they want to say you're nothing but a number. Like, you can't replace me.
Right.
Good luck.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Man, I know when I tested, there were 5 spots, and I think it was like 2,800 applicants or something like that, and I got one of the 5 spots. And I don't know about now. I do know like a year ago, in one testing process, which I think they do like every 6 months, I think you're getting like 90 applicants total. Applicants, not people they're considering applicants. Like that says something about the policing in this country or even this state and the culture of policing. That says a ton. Like the guys like us are fading away. Sorry, Mitch, you got a long road, brother. Like
17 more years,
right? So, man, well, I'd like to lead into, Matt, if you're good with it. I'd like to dive into, we've kind of touched on. So, at this point in your life, you're dealing with your personal life traumas, but you're, for lack of a better term, you're rangering up. You're a SWAT operator. You're committed to the mission. Can you tell me about the incident? Was it during the SWAT operation that you guys got the distinguished service award for taking somebody down? Wasn't that during a SWAT mission?
Yeah, it was. I remember I was at briefing, and another operator walked by and said, "Hey, start gearing up. The call out's coming." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I actually had a commissioner riding with me at the time that I had to like send away because like, yeah, this is going to be no fun for you, and I can't take you. And the backstory was a military veteran who was in extreme crisis, had held his girlfriend hostage and beat her up and said he was going to kill her and put a gun in her mouth. And she had made an escape and was able to get away and notify the police. And the agency that responded initially like heard the backstory, and so they did a really good job of like, okay, we're not going to go and try and make contact. They just had some people like a couple buildings away just watching the door just to see if he was still there, if he was going to leave. And they called us right away. And so I was one of the first to show up with 2 other guys that were much senior to me, and I had one of the unmarked Tahoes, and we jumped in. I was driving, and the 2 other guys that were with me, and we went and parked in the parking lot and developed this plan of while we're waiting for the other team or the rest of the team to gear up, if he comes out, what are we going to do? And he came out and kind of looked around and was doing a heat check, and then went back inside, and then he came out and walked to his car, and we're probably like 60 yards away or so at the other end of this parking lot. So
and he doesn't even know you guys are there yet?
Nope. We're and then
so you're covert at this time. You're not over. You're covert at this time.
Yeah, we're still covert. The other patrol guys are just out of sight, and they're making sure they stay chilly. And so he starts going to his car, and I just start driving through the parking lot, driving cool and slow and smooth. And we get almost to his car, and I crank it into the back of his car to pin it. At the same time, my buddies are opening up the car doors. Flashbang goes out, and rifles come out, and he gave up, and we took him into custody without incident. The scary part about that is after we got him in custody and I was patting him down, he had 3 or 4 handguns with multiple magazines for each, several knives, 4 cat tourniquets, and he
had cat tourniquets on him?
Yeah, he was carrying them. And he said, I came out expecting to fight the cops. I came out for a gunfight. I expected to tourniquet myself and then reload and keep fighting. But what he said is like, he's like the probably the best compliment I received from a suspect while I was on SWAT is, "You guys are good." He goes, "I came out for a fight, not to get executed. he didn't even know we were there until all of a sudden the flashbang goes out and he's got a rifle drilled into the side of his head, and he's like, "Yeah, I didn't come out to get executed. You guys win."
Wow.
And he went to prison.
Yeah, hell yeah. Jeez.
So that was a very big deal that the three of us took him down just by using good tactics and coming up with a good plan and executing that, and just doing the right things at the right time.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're fortunate. Our training is just above par.
Number one training agency in the state, actually.
And our tactical team is just, yeah.
Oh yeah. No, you guys have. I've always loved that. You get back in the day. I mean, there used to be this. People hated our tactical team, right? We all thought they were a bunch of prima donnas, but it's like, man, no.
Well, some of that was earned.
Oh, it was. It absolutely was. Yes, it was absolutely earned. Yeah, some of you guys were like, "Fuck you guys," but very, very, very good at what you do. I mean, very skilled, very fluid with what you guys do. Like, I've always respected that, and coming from we'll say teams in the military, like, I'm very aware of the tactics, and I'm very, very appreciative, and I respect that. So, yeah. So then later on in your career, I love how they call this an award. You got a Purple Heart. Are you up for talking about that? You want to run me through that, Cole?
Yeah, that actually happened before I got on SWAT. Probably
was it?
2000? Yeah, probably 2011 or 2012.
I guess it was.
Maybe I think about 2012.
Yep.
Called to a welfare check of a mentally ill man whose ex-wife and other family members were there, worried about him and wanting him to go to the hospital because he was not taking his meds. He'd been up for like several days. It's been a long time since I thought about this. Forgive me if I don't remember all the details, but we didn't have enough to place him on a hold. But we're like, well, we should try and at least engage with him and see if we can get him to go voluntarily, kind of thing, because he needs
to get some help. Get some help.
Yeah. And we've been out in the parking lot of this apartment complex for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes talking with his family. And he'd come out on the balcony, so he knew the police were there. And beforehand, I don't remember when I learned this information or if it was after the incident happened. But I guess at some point he said, if police or fire come to the door, I'll stab them in the throat or stab them in the face. I don't specifically remember when that rung a bell. Like, I remember hearing that. But also at the same time, like, people say all kinds of stuff, and we don't let that necessarily stop us from doing our job. And so me and my district partner, he sees us. We've waved to him. He's been in and out several times. We're going to go up. We're going to knock on the door. We're going to ask if he wants any help, and we'll see where we go with it. So we go up, and this door is like right at the top of some stairs, and we're on the stairs. I knock on the door, and he opens the door, and I'm like, "Hey, we'd like to check on you. Can we come in to check on you?" And he's like, "Well, you can try." And I'm like, "Oh, that's dark. That's scary." Like, I remember just going, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
I can try. What does that mean? So I said, "Well, I don't know what you mean, but how about we come in and we can just talk to you. We're worried about you. Your family's worried about you." He goes, "Well, you can try." And so I was like, okay. I took that last step up off the stairs onto the landing. And as soon as I hit that top step, the door flew open. It was an inward opening door. And he was standing there and had a huge knife in his hand, like a big kitchen knife. And I remember, like, I don't have video memory of the incident. I only have snapshot memory and a feeling. Like, the next couple seconds were a blur. I remember going, "Oh shit, that's a big fucking knife." And then looking at my hands going, "What the fuck is this?" Because it turns out he threw bleach on me. But I didn't know what happened. All I knew is that, like, I've now got like a whole bunch of stuff on me, and he's crazy. So my mind goes, "Oh my God."
Like he was like a distraction, like he threw a distractionary device.
I don't know, but I was like, this guy is not well. He probably just threw semen all over me. That's the only thing my mind would come on. And I remember looking at my hands going, what the fuck is that? And then I had the feeling of just getting cut on my arm.
Oh, wow. So he actually came at you.
Oh, yeah. He started, I don't know what to call it, because like I said, I don't have video memory of it. I just have the feeling of like, he's got a huge knife and I'm getting cut right now. And I mean, we're up close and personal, and I end up shooting him 5 times in the stomach and the pelvic region. And,
wow.
At point blank range, essentially.
Yeah.
Like close quarters.
Yeah. I don't remember my gun coming out of my holster. I don't remember the sounds. After the feeling of getting cut, the first memory I have is looking at my gun and going, fuck, I am fast. Because we had just started transitioning from the old Safariland 295 holsters.
Yeah.
First holster with the bucket style with a light. And I never felt as fast as I did with that Safariland. And I'm like, oh my God, am I going to be fast? Am I going to be fast enough? And then my brain goes, yeah, you're fucking fast.
Right.
I'm like, oh, shit, never mind, got to go back to work. And we holstered up and we did life-saving measures and got him packaged up and in the ambulance, and he lived, which I was very, very grateful that he lived. I mean, I didn't sign up to kill anybody. It's something that we might be called to do in certain circumstance, but the reality was this was a guy who was mentally ill, off his meds, and had never had police contact in his life. He'd never even had a traffic ticket. The worst break of his life, he made a very bad decision to pick the fight he couldn't win.
Wow. And it was with the cops.
Yeah.
Jesus. And that's got to be, like, so to reiterate, because I remember, because I've, as an instructor, you know, over the years, with Matt's permission, of course, I've told Matt's story about that. And it's a testament to the training, because Matt, even at this point when this happens, Matt, you're a senior DT guy, right? It's that muscle memory kicks in.
Kind of. I mean, our agency has always taught knife defense, as especially up close and personal, as attacking the weapon system, getting it offline, the kind of Krav Maga, like redirect, control, attack, take away principles. And that's not what I did. I was getting stabbed and I pulled out my gun and I shot him. And I remember as an instructor, all the old school guys that were like, didn't want to train combatives were like, I'm just going to shoot him. And what this incident really taught our training department is, you know, there's a lot of value into those Krav Maga tactics in the right circumstances.
Right.
If you have the time and ability to do it. But in mine, it was an ambush, and he was pressing into me, but not so much that he was on top of me. So I had space and opportunity to exploit. But if he had been like much more aggressive and like got on top of me and started pushing me down like the hallway, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So the big learning point for our agency was the principle is stop the threat. How do you stop the threat? Well, it depends on your circumstance. Sure. And in this circumstance, it was more appropriate just to go straight to my gun because I had the space and opportunity versus trying to wrestle a knife out of his hand.
And then, so in a OIS or an officer involved shooting, now you get the 2 weeks off, right? That's and then 2 weeks off, return to duty, back to work after 2 weeks.
Yeah, that was I mean, a lot of people will tell you that it's not exactly like 2 weeks off because there's a lot of steps to go through. My return to duty 2 weeks off was extra stressful. We hadn't talked about.
We'll get there.
So my shooting was in September, and in January 2nd, earlier that year, my dad had been retired for about two and a half years, and he shot and killed himself. And so when I'm going through this return to duty, like my dad was supposed to be my second phone call.
Yeah.
And so I'm on this return to duty process, struggling, and like I'm getting ready to do a hunting trip with my brother-in-law and my uncle and my best friend to go and spread his ashes. And I'm like, I'm spinning. I'm super anxious. Like even right now, just remembering the story, I've got goosebumps. I can turn my blood to ice just thinking of that. And so I'm
So
going through this, like, all these emotions, and on top of that, getting ready to go and spread my dad's ashes.
So you got in 1 year in January. How long had your dad been retired?
2.5 years, maybe 3.
And like we had talked about, this is an old school. We hit it on earlier, right? This is an old school cop. Been doing that shit for decades. That silence is never broken. And to talk about this stuff, right? To talk about the traumas, the PTSD, the stigma's got to be broken so that people like your dad, we can hopefully touch before that happens. So in 1 year, you're dealing with this man who just dedicated decades of his life to an agency, never got help that you know of, I'm assuming. Would you mind talking about when that happened? Are you okay with that? Like, are you okay with talking about how it happened and kind of what led up to it?
Yeah, he'd been struggling for a while. Him and my mom had split up. He wasn't doing good. He was spiraling. There's a lot of other factors that were going on my family wise that I'm going to leave out of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he was struggling quite a bit, not doing well, and he'd actually been hospitalized for like 4 or 5 days at one point during all that. He had a bunch of other health issues as well, and he never really let on to any of us like how dark a time he was in and what his thoughts were. Mm-hmm. And so was it a surprise? Yes, but also kind of not a full surprise. Because I always kind of wondered, like, would he be the guy that could potentially do that? I mean, he's struggling pretty hard, but he seems to be getting by, and yeah, life is hard for him. But okay, I don't know, and he never really talked about it. And yeah, that morning, I was getting ready to go to work for swing shift, and the kids are running around, and my mom called, and she was crying, and I'm like, oh shit, what happened? And he had come back to her house, the house I grew up in, with his car loaded full of like everything he owned, and parked in the driveway, and shot himself once in the heart and once in the head.
Shot himself twice?
The best that we could guess is he shot himself in the heart, and then it was like painful, and he was like bleeding out, and it was taking a really long time, and then he shot himself in the head.
God, I'm so sorry, man.
Yeah, I remember just saying, okay, I'm not going to work. My ex actually called in for me and told him what was going on, and said, yeah, he's not coming in. He's going to be out for a couple of days. Driving out to my mom's and seeing a big blanket in the driver's seat of his truck. And I remember talking to the local cops that responded and talking to him outside, and just kind of like walked by on the far side of the driveway and didn't even look.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. It was it was really hard, and I didn't go to the viewing because I have this saying, I don't like dead bodies. They're like snakes. Right. They move funny. I don't want to see any more dead people.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And I definitely did not want to see my dad's body before or at the funeral home.
Nope, I was the same with my dad. Yep, amen.
I made the mistake of going out to his truck like the next day, and it wasn't very messy, but there was some blood that had like pooled on the floor and on the seatbelt, and I cleaned it.
Jesus, man.
I didn't know what else to do. No one in my family was capable of doing it. It had to get done. I didn't have the money to pay someone
Right.
because it was going to be like a hazmat kind of thing. And I just gritted my teeth and I did it. And I think that's very indicative of what a lot of cops go through during their career of like, I got this, I can do this, I can do what no one else can do, what no one else is willing to do. And it was not good. I paid the price.
I've always said for years, like, if not me, then who? Right? And especially in your situation, right? You got 2 sisters and a mom. You're the man now. You're already a man to be. You know what I mean? And it's like, man, I know you. You ain't gonna let your sisters do that. You sure the hell ain't gonna let your mother do that.
Yeah. I completely understand. If not me, then who? And it makes a lot of sense. Or who's going to go into this burning building and rescue all those kids? Yeah, it's going to be me. That's the easy one. But it's all these other small things that like they start to weigh on you, and you start having memories of certain things and experiences, and they build up over time. I have a really hard time talking about my career and my story because on one hand, it like the things I went through don't sound very very grand to me. I mean, I know dudes who've been shot and nearly killed. I know people that have been seriously injured in car crashes. Like my story just to me seems like, oh, that's just the job. But then when you sit back and like you start going through like counseling and they have you do a trauma timeline and you're like, oh, look at my trauma timeline. Like I need like 5 more pieces of paper.
Yeah, at least.
At least, and then you start looking at it like it goes, no, it started as a child and it went through college, and then I'm in this career and I'm subjected to trauma after trauma, and some of them might not affect you and some of them do, like depending on where you are that day, what your experience has been, and not everyone has the same traumas. I like to say it's a roll of the dice. Because my 20 years on the road is very different than other people's 20 years. People that promote go to detectives. And some days, like you roll the dice, and you decided to take the day off, and you're not there for that incident. And some days you're like you're there, and it's those days that really weigh on you.
Which is always that weird. It's that weird, like, you took the day off because, like, I'm going to take an extra long weekend, and you come back to work. And all the cool shit happened when you were gone. You're like, are you fucking kidding me? Right? Like, even though it's better, right? Because it's just less trauma we're exposed to. But because of who you are and why you do the job, it also, I mean, I can remember how many times when I was Saturday, Sunday, Monday, you were Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And me and our other district partner were just rolling shit up on Fridays. And you're like, are you kidding me? Like you guys would on my weekend.
You wouldn't do that any of the days that I work.
we were just trying to protect you, Matt. That's all it was. Oh man. Well, so you're dealing with that. You have this OIS, and I remember all this. Like I remember the aftermath of the OIS and.
It didn't get any easier. When we talk about like the roll of the dice, my very first day back to work, I had a knife pulled on me by a mentally ill person. Going to do a welfare check and come down the stairs. He's coming down the stairs because his mom called him, and I'm like, hey, I see you have a knife in your pocket. Just don't touch it. And what's the very first thing he does? What? Grabs it like right in front of me and gets tackled, and I'm like, really, universe, this is fucked.
Right.
And
that was earlier in the shift.
Oh, that was pretty early in the shift.
Yes.
And so after that, I'm like sitting in a parking lot going, okay, I got this. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. And then near the end of the shift, it was another mentally ill person, suicidal, armed with a knife, walking around an apartment complex. And I remember getting out of my car and like waiting for other people, and I just walked right into him, and I held him at gunpoint to everyone else showed there. And I'm like, yeah, that was you. Yeah. So my very first day back, I get 2 more guy with a knife calls, and Yeah, I don't think the universe was very happy with me for some reason that day.
And I remember, and this isn't to dime you out because I've told this before, but it shows the trauma, right? The trauma response. And I remember because I was the first one there when you were calling for code 3 cover, and I come screaming in there, and you've got this guy, you've got your rifle, you're holding this guy at gunpoint, and he's compliant. And I remember hearing, like we all know our buddies, and I remember hearing this tone. I couldn't see you, but as you're giving him commands, and my hackles went up, like something sounded off. And everything was fine. I remember we move in, we get this guy handcuffed, and you were super chill, super calm, and you're going to start because you're the primary investigator on this now. So I remember you said, "Hey man, will you take my rifle back to my car for me and stow up my car?" You don't remember this?
I remember very little of it.
Yeah. So I was like, "Yep, absolutely." So I go and to make your rifle patrol ready to get it locked up, drop the mag, pull the bolt back. There was nothing chambered. Nothing. Now, again, I've seen you operate a rifle. Click, you're going to get one chambered. No issues. But it lends the only reason I'm saying this is because you had just had an OAS and you got your, we'll call it 2 weeks off. That's not 2 weeks because there's all the interviews and all the bullshit throughout because there's no time off. It's just not. And it's not okay. It's one of the things that I wish agencies would change. 2 weeks is not enough time off when you just shot another human and your brain is still trying to recoup from your dad. You guys are planning this trip to go spread his ashes, and now this OIS, and then 2 almost identical calls, and you're not functioning. Like there's no fine motor skills that are even able to function at that point. It's gross motor, like you're surviving. Like your body is just in survival mode. And then what do? You go right back to work.
That was very, very scary for me when I found out that I didn't have one in the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh shit, am I
we never told anybody.
Well, of course we never told anybody.
Until now.
Now we've told everybody.
Everyone knows.
Yeah, but that was years ago. But no, we kept it between that because I knew what Matt was going through. It's like it's not a training issue. Like it's Matt. Like it's whatever. Matt trained me for shit's sake. It's not a training issue. Like it lends to that mental state, the trauma response of what the hell.
All those small detail things, the things you take for granted, just sometimes aren't there if you're in that fog. And I think I was likely in that fog. I was super stressed out. I was, I barely, it's been over 10 years since that day. I don't really remember hardly anything about it other than it happened. And then I remember kneeling down next to my car, breathing when he took my rifle from me.
Yep. I do. I remember that too. I'll never forget it. It was, I think, looking back on it, I think that was even my first exposure to, I wouldn't say exposure. It was my first realization to the effects that this job can have on you. Now, I squashed it away, and because that's what you do. It's like, cool, let's do that shit again. That was fun. Let's do this again. And all that fun stuff accumulates. And like even driving fast in traffic, like the shift that we work, the shift that you used to work before you
day shift
became a quitter with the day shift.
Yeah, before you went to your banker's hours. Like, what are you laughing at, Mitch? You did the same thing.
Yep, sure.
You know what I mean? But even running code 3 at 2 p.m, driving in oncoming traffic, it's super fun. But the fact of the matter is, it's also traumatic. It's a response, right? It's a dopamine dump.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it feels good, it's not healthy to do repeatedly and a lot. And man,
because you're redlining, even if it's fun and enjoyable, your body is still amped up. You're running at a red line.
Yeah.
4 or 5 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day.
Yep.
Over years.
It's
it wears on you.
Yeah. See, I mean, you think about that and you add that up, you're 20 years into this. Mitch, he started this at 15 as a cadet, and imagine, and he's being exposed as a cadet. He's being exposed to the same shit that these cops are being exposed to as a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah, as a child.
Yeah, like your mind's not even developed yet.
Yeah, no, my childhood just was stripped away from me.
Yeah. Right? For noble reasons.
Sure, of course.
Right? But wow. So you go from this OIS and this trauma response, and I mean, that's, like I said, that was 10 years ago, and man, I mean, we could sit here for days because the stories you and I have, Jesus, like, but so how do you come out of that? What was your, did the agency that you, at the time, did they give you any help? Was it just compartmentalizing it, or what'd you do for yourself?
Well, at the time, there's not a lot that the agency could do because they can't wave a magic wand and give you something. Because if they did something for me, then that means the next person that asks automatically gets it, and then they run the risk of like playing favorites and lawsuits and labor practices. So while the agency or the people in the agency might care and want to help, either by law or by policy or whatever, they can't really do a whole lot.
Right.
And so I started actually seeing a counselor in 2016, right around the same time that I started going through my divorce is when I started seeing a counselor. I had seen a counselor maybe a handful of times before that, kind of sporadically, but since 2016, it's been weekly, bi-weekly.
But you're talking 4 years after your dad dying and having an OIS. It still took you 4 years to come around to saying, "Oh fuck, I need help." Was there something that specifically happened for you, Matt, that you were like, "I'm broken"?
Yeah, I already kind of touched on it when I came home from that class. Like I had a bunch of like really bad experiences, and then that was like the one that goes, "Oh, I really need help," and that's when I started seeing a counselor.
Good, yeah, and you still do to this day.
Yes.
Yep. I mean, don't we all? Well, all that are talking right now, for sure.
Oh, I mean, there is some of like not wanting to seem weak and not wanting to admit that you're broken or you're wounded, kind of thing. But there's also another level of it. This is what you do for your family, and while we get paid well for what we do, if that goes away, what do you have to fall back on? So there is an avenue of this, like you have to keep going. You have to kind of tuck it away and try and deal with it on your own. Because if you don't, you could lose your career. Actually, like one of my most traumatic calls that I responded to happened the month before I actually got on SWAT. I'm pretty sure I'd been told that I'm on and I'm going to start in about a month. And I was first on scene to a call where a young woman had been stabbed in the heart, and I don't know how to really say it. It wasn't like dramatic like you see in the movies, but she died in my arms. Like we had gone up and rescued her from the second floor.
Well, hold on, back up a little bit. I don't want to say sorry to cut you off because I'm not sorry. I want you to, if you're willing, Matt, would you go through, because you got to understand, some people are going to listen to this, they don't understand cop talk, right? They don't understand. Would you mind going through, like, you get that dispatch call, like the things that you're thinking about when you hear the dispatch call, right? Because we hear that dispatch call and we're already running things through our head, like, oh, this is a nothing, or great, another whatever. If you can recall or try to at the best you can, start with that. I get this dispatch call and then go from there.
I remember I was parked in the back of a church, starting to eat a sandwich because I was really hungry, and he has alert tones that go out over the radio when like a serious call or a call involving weapons comes out. So I've had like 2 bites of the sandwich and the tones go off, and I'm like, well, okay, there went my lunch, and I start packaging up my sandwich again because I'm like, I just had the feeling that it was going to be in my district or the neighboring district that I'm going to end up going to this. And it was an apartment complex like less than a half a mile from where I was. And the call came out as a woman who had been stabbed, and they didn't know where the suspect was.
Mm.
And I know this apartment complex very well because I've been in that district for a long time, and I knew the ins and outs of it. And I went screaming in there and was able to figure out which building it was, and it was all the way at the back. And I get there, and we really don't have any information. And I don't remember how I got cued into the building, but this other couple that like lived in the adjacent building found her running in the parking lot and grabbed her and took her up these stairs towards their apartment to try and keep her safe. And I went up there and we found her, and she was not doing good at all. And I knew we had to like try and do some of the medical aid kind of thing. And I told the guy, grab her feet. I just started barking orders at him. Like, he very well could have passed out and fainted, but I just yelled at him and told him what to do. And he picked up her feet, and I grabbed her under the wrist, and we carried her down the stairs to a spot that we had like a little warm zone where we could start working on her. And I remember I at the time I hadn't been on SWAT yet. I hadn't been to like TCCC training for like combat casualty care, penetrating trauma. At the time, I'm like, I didn't really know what to do for that. And like, we cut open her shirt, and there was like a small puncture, like right at her xiphoid process. I didn't know what to do. We had a Israeli pressure dressing that we just held over it.
All you can do. Yeah.
All we can do. And like, it turns out we found out later it had pierced her left ventricle, and she had like 0% chance. Like if it had happened on the operating table, like it's like 1 out of 100, she might have made it. Like by the time they did the surgery. And I remember just like going like, there's nothing we can do. We're waiting for medical kind of thing. They're coming in, medical gets there. They put a lead on, they start feeling for ephemeral pulse. And I'm like, and they call it like immediately.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, we don't fucking call it. Like, it hasn't been enough time. And they're like, no, she's gone. And I remember like just before that sitting there, like, and this is where I came to believe in the soul, because there's something like I watched her change. I watched every spark of like life leave her body. Like her eyes changed, her entire body changed, and she was not there anymore.
Do you remember that CPR call involving, I want to say maybe a 3-month-old that I messaged you about when I got AVL'd to it? And my daughter was 3 months old at the time. I asked you to go to it instead of me. This was a while ago.
I don't specifically remember it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't deal with like child CPR calls because of how old my kids were, and you took on that responsibility, and I appreciate that.
I think that is something that people need to be aware of what's going to trigger them. So like Mitch, what you said, like a child CPR call when you've got a kid that age, that triggers you. I don't do gunshot suicides anymore. I flat out refuse. And most of the sergeants and my district partners know why. I will show up. I will work the outside of the team. We'll talk to the family. I am not going near that body, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the trade-off that we can provide with each other.
Yeah, we touched on that. I think it was the last episode. We talked about that too, right? Covering being in tune with the people you work with, and again, it's more of that awareness too for the traumas. Welcome back to Shielded Voices, Matt. Last time before the break, you kind of touched on this, what we refer to as that one call. You're referring to the female with the stabbing. You wanna pick up there, like how you came through that?
Well, I didn't come through it all that well. Like I said, I had just been selected to SWAT, hadn't been to any training days yet. And about a month after that call was my first training day. And we were running a mass casualty training for a bunch of agencies in the area. And as a new guy that hadn't been to any training days yet, I wasn't allowed to do anything other than like be scene security. Like I put up tape to tape off the parking lots and stuff like that. That was like my whole job. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm getting paid. And at one point, the team commander came over and says, gear up, you're going in with the next wave of students. And I'm like, oh, okay. So the scenario is a bomb and active shooter that goes off at a church. And so in that scenario, I'm one of the first to arrive and punch into the building to do our thing. And this was like a big training that we actually had like 30, 40, 50 role players with moulage kits. And I remember like going through and there's fake blood everywhere. There's bodies on the ground. And I remember walking by this role player that was like laying on the ground and started mimicking agonal breathing.
Oh.
And I looked down at her and my entire world changed to watching that girl that I just watched die. That's exactly what she did near the end. And I had a complete flashback. I completely left that and was back to that incident that happened a month before. And I'm looking down like, oh, fuck. And I shook my head and I just carried on because like it's my first day on SWAT. I can't have a mental breakdown my very first day at SWAT in a training scenario. That's just not going to go well. That's not going to keep me on the team. And I got through it, and I'm like, oh, I probably should deal with that. And I did.
Was there rhetorical question for us, but I'm going to say it. When you had this 20-something-year-old female literally die in your arms, come back to work the next day, or did you get time off? I'm not talking about your weekend. I know the answer.
Did I come back the next day?
Uh-huh.
I don't remember if it was the next day or if it was my weekend, but yeah,
well,
I did not get any of the critical incident protocol.
That's my point. You came back your next shift. There was no critical incident protocol, and I mean the fact that none, and there still isn't to this day. They're better. They're better.
They're way better.
Way better.
The problem is it's not always they don't always recognize right away when it needs to happen. So in my incident, they're like, oh, this is like we're working this as a homicide, and they just carry on, and they get tied up in the details of like, hey, we have a homicide suspect who's unidentified, it's on a run, and it's a big deal. And I remember a friend of mine from a local agency messaged me, and she said, we see a lot of dead people, but watching somebody die is not the same.
That's not the same.
And so some people realize it, some people don't when the critical incident needs to be called for. But also at the same time, like, we're in this culture of like, for me to come forward at this time in like 2014 or so, that was 2014, to come forward and be like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and take critical incident protocol now. Thank you very much. It's not in those days. It wasn't done. Yeah, and like I would have been the very first one to ever do that, like to call it on myself.
Right.
And I don't think anyone's ever called it on themselves.
But what I will say, and again, we're not mentioning agency names. Obviously, there's some people listening that know where we work, and this is where I will give this agency credit, because I've seen it happen. I have gone where we had a particular really really new guy show up, and it was a domestic graveyard. I just happened to be as the use of force guy watching the body cam, and this like the day after, and it was a domestic where dude like lit the apartment on fire, and she's still inside. He's first one there. He goes in and he's dragging her out, and you can see on body cam just blood all the way down the stairs where he's dragging her down this apartment, and nobody did shit. And I'm like, time out. And this is where I give the agency credit, because they weren't there. All they just get right. Command level just gets the tidbits for what they need to run their business. That's fine. However, it's pretty awesome, because I was actually able to go to lieutenant and be like, hey, this is what happened. This dude needs to be on critical incident, and absolutely, like there was no questions asked. And they are very very good about that these days. They absolutely are, and I give them credit.
I've had to do that same thing. I had a recruit that was with a fill-in coach for the day while I was helping teach a class, and then I heard that he was on a call and was in the next room when a guy shot himself and killed himself.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm like, how did he do? Like, oh, he did good. We got through it. Cool. Why are you guys not on critical incident protocol?
Yeah.
Why you guys like get a couple days off? Oh, well, no one thought of it. And so I walk over to the lieutenant. And I'm like, sir, this happened to my recruit yesterday. What do you think about critical incident protocol? And he says, oh, yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's done.
Yeah.
And he made a couple phone calls and got the ball rolling. It's who is going to make that call right away, especially.
We've got to break the silence.
Well, it's a chaotic scene, a chaotic environment where there's a lot of things going. And that is one of the first things that gets kind of overlooked, of like, how is this going to affect my troops?
Well, and I think a lot of people are, and Mitch, I mean, Ben, you probably had your own experience, but a lot of people are afraid to say something. That's really what this is all about across the level, is breaking that silence across the level, whether it's senior guys like us or a brand new rookie on his own. Break the silence, man. Go to people and be like, hey, I see this dude struggling. Like, he had this call last night. He needs to be awake. Like, you can see it in people's eyes. You've seen it in mine. I've seen it in yours. I mean, all three of us can say the same thing, but there's always been this fear, because the problem is, if I go to a lieutenant and be like, hey, I just was with Matt in the equipment room. We're talking about a call and he looks pretty distraught. Well, you're not going to dime your buddy out, because we don't know what the agency is going to do. I think now they're going to help you these days. Back in the day, they'd have hung you out to dry.
Yeah, I agree, because going back to, this is your job, this is what you signed up for, suck it up and push forward. But that's completely changed. And I mean, look at me, admin leave because of mental health, right? Yeah, they're doing a better job of recognizing mental health and the shit that we see, the shit that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the individual that's making that call. I was on a SWAT call out where the suspect got shot, and I was driving the armor, and he was more or less shot like 10 feet from the front window, and I watched it happen. And I'm like, oh, that's fine. I've been on a couple of these at this point. Like, oh, no big deal. And the team commander says, hey, you qualify for 2 weeks. No, I'll just, I'll take tomorrow off, and then I'm on my weekend. I'm good. And he kind of, but he knows what's kind of going on with me in the background with my my pending divorce. And he kind of cocks his head to the side and glares at me. He goes, you qualify for 2 weeks. And I'm like,
yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And I really appreciate that he did that, because if he didn't just say, listen, this is what you're doing, even though he couldn't make me do it, I needed that. I needed the break. And but also at the same time, I was like single, living alone. I didn't have my kids with me at that time. And so I had nothing to do other than sit and spin.
Stew, yeah.
Sit and stew, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So what happened? I called my mom and I'm like, hey, do you still want a bathroom remodel? And I spent 2 weeks remodeling her bathroom because I couldn't sit
Wow.
still. Yeah.
Well, and there's something to be said about that, right? We do, when we get in those funks, we feel like we feel like being at work takes our mind off of it, but in reality, all we're doing is exposing ourselves to more acute traumas. That's all we're doing. But we feel like we're numb to it, right? Like your whole career, like I got this, I got this, I got this. Did you ever experience like that? Just, I mean, I know you talked about the one where you just, you went to the class, but even since then, have you experienced that, just like just a breakdown? Like I've talked about my own, where I'm done. Like I'm broken and I got nothing left in the tank.
Kind of, because I'd been seeing counselors the last like 10 years, and I've gone to a trauma retreat and some of the other things that I've done for mental health. I'm better at dealing with things, but also like 20 years on, like my capacity has it's different now. We recently had this call that was the setup for like my ongoing combat dream. I don't know why, but for some reason, my entire career, I've always had a reoccurring dream that I'm going to be on a call and it's going to be like a hostage rescue, and either I'm going to be a shooter or my team's going to be a shooter, and we're going to like rescue a baby. And I'm like, in my dream, I'm like carrying a baby outside. Like my dreams got so vivid of like picking up a baby, going over to a changing table, and I'm kitted out changing a baby's diaper because we just smoked the hostage taker kind of thing. So this very vivid dream that keeps coming back. We were on the setup for that call fairly recently, where you had a very immediate danger to a 4-month-old, and a situation we end up at the patrol level doing a deliberate entry and to rescue this kid. That was the priority. And I remember sitting outside going, oh my God, it's happening. This is the dream. You universe, I can't believe you're fucking doing this to me. And I think I sounded like a goddamn Lamaze class. Just
combat breathing, baby.
Oh yeah, and I'm breathing. I'm like leaning into it, and then they call, okay, on approach, and we move up. And the good part is I can like rely on my training. I can lean into the training still. I remember like, yep, okay, we're cool, calm. I'm watching through the windows. I'm giving updates. They're trying to breach the front door. Suspects barricading. We route around to the back, start compromising glass. I use my rifle to break out the glass and make a doorway for us and step in. It all went pretty smooth, and we did a good job. And then I was right back to trying to calm myself down. And so it's this weird thing, like kind of like, if not me, then who? I can still do it. If it kicks off, I can just lean into it and go. But my cost is different these days.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that sits with me is, if not me, then who? It's my burden to bear.
Yeah. Luckily, that one worked out good, and nothing really bad happened. But it was still like my cost is changing. Like, and I've had this thought several times in my career when I've thought about getting out of the business of like, God, I am just holding my hand to the fire, hoping I don't get burned, trying to make the retirement plan.
That's right. And we get, Mitch, like what you just, if not me, then who? We've always said that, and it's our burden to bear. It is until it's not. And even if it's not at 2 years on or 30 years on, it doesn't matter, because when it's not, it's not. And it's okay, right? That's one of the things that we emphasize, that it's okay. It's okay to not bear that anymore. It just is, right? We have to have this exit strategy. But guess what? Sometimes you don't have to have an exit strategy.
Yeah.
You know, like, and sometimes it's got to be forced on us, because we're holding on so tight. And for me, you know, I can look back on it and you know, God's been trying to lead me in a direction for a long time, but my stubbornness is like, are you kidding me? I am so good at what I do. And this isn't me being a narcissist, like conceited. I'm very, very good at what we do because I have a passion for it and I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Both of you
love,
guys are.
and I love people. That's
Yeah.
what makes us good at it. It's because we love people. Like we joke all the time, like, I hate fucking people. I don't want to be. It's horseshit. We love people. We want to be around people, whether it's golfing or pick your hobby. We want to be around people. We just get to select the people that we're around as opposed to forced into it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Matt, what have you done like in the moments that you're struggling with your own mental health? Do you have I mean, we all recognize our triggers. Do you have something that's a go-to for you that maybe some advice you could give either a younger cop or even somebody who is struggling with, I don't know what to do or I'm stuck? What have you done for your own resilience in this, in your own moments?
Yeah. Well, I dabbled in a lot of things over the years. I've been to West Coast post-trauma retreat. That was an amazing experience. I'm very grateful for my opportunity to go there and get my therapy and my healing started. I dabbled in fitness and yoga, mindfulness practices, meditation. It's kind of like everything else I do. I don't have a one thing. Like certain people like, this is what I do. I do a little bit of everything, and I pick and choose what feels good that day. Like I'm the worst to go to a restaurant with because I'm like, I'll take whatever. I never ordered the same thing twice.
Right? Yeah, I've always envied that about you. Always.
Yeah, I'll try something new, and I'm like, yeah, I don't feel like that today. So I do a lot of that. I play golf. I play rugby. I play touch rugby. For me, it starts with mindfulness of being aware of like what I'm feeling like internally, kind of like you ever like look at the book The Body Keeps Score. Like I can tell when I'm triggered. I don't even have to like think about my thoughts or anything like that. I can tell internally like what's going on with my body, like the physical sensations that like something is wrong. And then when I feel something like that, I will take a few minutes to either meditate. I have an ongoing journaling practice where I go through thoughts, feelings, actions, and gratefulness. And that really helps me kind of get a bearing on what is I'm going through, bring to light like where I am. And the more that I do those practices, the quicker I am to catch myself, especially when it comes to like negative thought patterns too, of like that little voice inside my brain will kick off and start running its mouth, and it's really not helpful. It's actually like it's mean. You know how they say you wouldn't talk to other people a certain way. Why would you talk to yourself like that?
Yep.
Yeah. My brain's a fucking dick.
Right.
It is mean.
Yeah.
And
Brian can't say that word.
Yeah.
I'm now much better to catch my mind doing that, to be like, oh no, that's a thought. I can detach from that thought. And
like I know that you touched on the journaling thing. I mean, like years and years and years ago, I did it and didn't know what I was doing. It was actually you, just in recent months that talked to me about it and kind of and I've done it and it's done wonders for me. Just writing things down. It's for me, it's almost like word vomiting. Like you're feeling sick, and when you puke, you feel better. Puke and rally. For me, that's what it does. If I can write it all down, I feel such an emotional relief when I write it down.
There's definitely a release aspect, and there's also the mindfulness, especially when you do pen and paper. Like you have to kind of focus on writing, kind of thing, and you kind of detach from all the other things and focus on that for a few moments.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's take another quick break, and we're going to come back and talk about this awesome organization that I've actually watched you work with. So we'll take another quick break, and we'll be back. All right, welcome back to Shielded Voices. Took a little bit of a break. It's been kind of a long one, lot to get through. Matt, you're still with us. On the break, we were kind of talking about some funny stories, and was kind of lighting this up before we go into the good part of what what you're coming through in this career. We've all got those funny stories, and it's my understanding that as a SWAT operator, you are tasked with, or should I say, in charge of several different types of munitions. And sounds like you may have had a little bit of a mishap with some certain less than lethal munitions, or what happened?
Well, I mean, I think in that environment, you could have all kinds of mishaps, missing the mark or missing your shot. Those things happen. I missed bad.
What munitions were you using?
Well, so it started that evening. Like I was newly single, and I had been out on a handful of dates with this young lady who then broke it off with me because I had a lot of shit to go through. I wasn't ready to really date anybody, and so I had just been dumped, and I'm sitting there in my apartment going, man, I haven't been dumped in like 20 years. Huh. Okay. And then my phones blow up and the call out comes for a guy who's got upset with his neighbors and set his neighbor's car on fire and is shooting the shotgun in the air outside. And I'm like, oh, this will take my mind off the weirdness of just getting dumped. And so I jumped in my car and responded. And I was on what we would call the 2 side of the house, away from the front door. So if you're looking at the house, looking at the front door, I'm off to the left side over there. And this guy is coming out onto his front porch. It's kind of like a long terraced front porch with a bunch of steps and different landings. And he comes out and he waves some whiskey around. And he talks some shit to the negotiators. He goes inside. He's in and out and in and out. And the couple guys that I was teamed up with, we came up with a plan for if we get enough separation, we're going to take him down before he can get back into the house where the gun is. Because when he comes outside, he's showing that he's unarmed.
Yeah.
And so we've got this plan where he gets out just enough, and the lead guy pulls out a flashbang, holds it up, and shakes it in front of us like, okay, that's a sign he's going to throw it. He pulls the pin and then steps around the corner and lobs it up towards this guy. I'm like, okay, cool, time to step out. And so as the bang's in the air, I go to step out. And my role on this is to use the taser while one of my other buddies is using 40 millimeter munitions. Mm-hmm. So as soon as we step out from around the corner, we didn't realize, or if we did realize, it didn't dawn on me, like we're on wet rocks. Like the entire front yard in this section is just river rock and it's wet outside.
Yeah.
And so I take 2 steps and I eat shit. Like I fall flat on my face, taser pointed out on my chest. Oh, in full kit. And I pop up to my knees and I take a taser shot as this guy is like running back towards the front door at about the range of the maximum range. And there were some intermediate bears. And so I missed. And he runs inside, closes the door, and I pick myself up, and I'm hurt. I'm like, ow, that hurts. And I pull myself up back to the side of the building, and we hear over the radio, okay, all right, mask up in pairs. We're going to gas. We're going to use chemical agents to get them out.
Yep.
So we mask up, and there's a window on my side, and I've got a couple gas cans. And so we're like, hey, put a gas can in that window right there. So I forget what we had, but we compromised that window, broke it out a little bit, and dropped a can of gas in on that side. And then like, hey, do the window on the one side. And this is like an old, like early 90s, late 80s split entry house with a daylight basement. And so the downstairs window to the left of the front door, it's one of those like big, like 3-pane windows. And I'm like, oh, I'm right there. It's like right next to the corner. I'll step out. I'll hand deploy some gas in this. And I look at the window, and we've broken it out at this point. I see the window coverings look like heavy curtains. Yeah. I'm like, oh, well, I want to get this gas further in so I get a different kind of disbursement. I don't want it just necessarily right at the window. And so I'm like, oh, I'll just like chuck it a little harder and get it through the window, and it'll get further into the inside, right? Well, I step out, I got my cover, and I go and I wind up like a softball pitcher, and I go to underhand toss it through, and then whack. I missed the window completely. I'm like I'm at arm's distance from this window, and
Oh
I'm
my God.
6 to 8 inches to the left of the window, and I hit the side of this house, and it sends the gas can like up like a rocket, and just this lobbing arm, and goes out into the middle of the street under the piece of armor, and then starts to deploy gas.
Oh no!
Oh yes, and all the operators are okay because they're used to it. They got gas masks.
Gas masks.
At the time, the hostage negotiators, not all of them had masks. Not all of them carried it. And so I guess the negotiators.
And now that's why they have masks.
Right?
Yes, they have masks now, and that was like, it was super funny. Luckily, I was off probation at this point, so I only took a little bit of heat for that, of like mostly taking jokes. And one of our coworkers, at any time for the rest of my SWAT career, was like, "Hey, we're going to hand deploy, or we're going to toss a flashbang." Anything that was tossed, he'd come up and take whatever I have in my hand and like walk away, because I wasn't allowed to throw anything ever again.
I love it.
After that, it was super funny, and one of my more memorable deployments, even though it's kind of embarrassing.
Oh, and so many. Like, I mean, we talk about the doom and gloom of this job, right, and the PTS. The fact of the matter is, we have a blast. Like, there's so many, and good things that come out of this job too, right? I mean, I had to go. I remember we did a dope hit on a house and executing a search warrant, and everything's awesome. Dudes, the typical crawls into the crawl space, and we get them flushed out of there with a canine and all the fun stuff. And I don't know, I'm 2 hours later, I'm sitting there writing my report, and like, okay, cool. I need to go back to the, into the night, and cool. And I'm unloading, and I'm like, where's my shield? I know I had a shield when we made entry to that house. So I'm calling everybody, and I'm like, hey, did you grab my shield? No, I don't have it. And I'm like, fuck, it's in that house. Yeah. And there's some people there. We left it, and I'm like, son of a bitch. So I got to call a sergeant and be like, so I left a ballistic shield in that house we just hit, that's full of all the bad guys still. So he goes, cool, you better have that before you end your shift. So I had to call some late grade guy to come help me, and he's like, what are we doing? I'm like, I just need cover. I didn't tell him. Like, I just need cover. I got to go talk to this guy. He's like, isn't this the house you guys just hit? I'm like, yeah, I just got to do a follow-up interview. No big deal. He's like, yeah, cool, whatever. So we go there, and I didn't even have to knock on the door. I round the corner, because they got cameras, of course, right? It's a dope house. I round the corner, and it's this long, like it's like a long walkway to the door through a gate. And as soon as I round the corner, the door comes open, and here's this dude with like 1.5 teeth holding my shield, and he's like, you guys fucking forget something? And I'm like, yeah, that's mine. He just laughed at us, and he was super cool about it. And when I walked away, and the guy that's covering me goes, are you fucking kidding me? That's what I'm here for? Yeah, man. Thanks. Have a good night. Like, God. Anyway, so before we went to break, we kind of started talking about the resiliency of it. And I know I kind of mentioned in the intro, you're the founder of Blue Line Golf. I know you. You've got a passion for golf. What brought you, before you go into like what Blue Line Golf is, because I want you to get a good plug for this, because I'm a believer in it. What made you get to the point that this is something you wanted to do?
Well, I kind of fell into it by accident, because I hadn't played golf in like 10 years really, and my head shrinker got mad at me. I wasn't like having a really good attitude in therapy, and she told me, goes, you need to get out of town. You need to break. You need to unplug. I want you to go to the beach or go to the mountains. I want you to hang out. I want you to breathe. I want you to get a massage. Do anything. Just get out of town. And I was like, okay. So I made reservations at this. It's at Salishan. It's on the Oregon coast over by Lincoln City. And I'm like, that looks like a nice place, and I've saved up a little money. I'm going to treat myself to a nice little weekend there. And I go and I check in, and I'm like, yeah, I'd also like to book a massage. And they're like, yeah, we're booked out. There's no massages. but if you want, you can do like a spa day, like manicures, pedicures kind of thing. And I'm like,
You did not.
no, of course not. No.
Yeah. And if you did, you wouldn't admit it.
No, for sure. And so I didn't know what else to do with my time. So I'm like, well, I guess I got to figure out something else to do with all this anxiety. And I wandered up to the bar and I got a glass of whiskey. Actually, I think I got a double. And I started walking through the hotel, and there was like a sign for a yoga seminar. And I'm like, oh, I know about yoga. Yoga's supposed to be good for you. And at this time of my life, when I'm single, I'm like, and I wouldn't mind meeting a yoga instructor this weekend.
Right.
So, yes, I was a complete douche. And I take this whiskey into this yoga seminar. And,
oh, no.
Yeah, I sat down at a yoga seminar, and it was actually a really informative talk that this instructor gave on the pillars of yoga, the mindfulness aspects, and the physicality and the spirituality. I was actually really intrigued. And near the end, and she's like, yeah, this is the greatest place to practice all this stuff, because we're out here and golf. You can play golf, and that's a mindfulness exercise. And I like to say my whiskey-laden SWAT brain goes, you mean to tell me that chasing that little white ball around for a couple hours is good for my brain?
Yeah, I can drink.
Oh, yeah. And she says, yes, it's really good. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a golfer. And so I called and I made a tee time for the next morning, and I got up, and I didn't have clubs. I used rental clubs. I bought 2 boxes of balls.
Of course.
I lost 2 boxes of balls on the front 9. And I played by myself too. Like it's just me out there, and I'm just like whacking fucking my way through this like front 9. And I'm like, hacking. Yeah. I'm like, I need another box of balls for the back 9. So I went and got a third box of balls for the back 9. And just being out there in the cold air. I mean, this was like January in the Oregon coast. It was like the nicest January day ever. And just being out in the wind and away from everything else, and focusing on what I'm doing right there, and just being out and moving for like 4 or 5 hours. I got to the end of it. I'm like, man, I feel really good. Like, yeah. I feel light. I feel happy. I feel excited. I'm going to be a golfer. And so I finished the weekend, and I went immediately into town, and I bought myself golf clubs and golf pants and a bag and everything. And I'm like, I'm going to be a golfer. And I started playing about once a week. Yeah. And I remember that was like the last year that I was on SWAT. And when I came off, I was headed out to the training site that's also on the Oregon coast for my final retirement ceremony. And on the way out there, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go and play like a really nice round and treat myself before I show up there that night. And I went and played the Gearhart Golf Links over just north of Seaside. Mm-hmm. And on the way out there, I'm like, God, golf is really helping me out. Like, I'm really enjoying this. I'm enjoying the community. I wonder if other people would enjoy this too. And I wonder if I can make a business about it. And then through a lot of learning and making contacts, I formed Blue Line Golf in 2021. Mm-hmm. And by 2022 or 2023, I had changed it into a 501c3 nonprofit. And we are in the process of getting started still and growing. And we put on golf leagues for active and retired law enforcement throughout the year. And we've actually built in a mindfulness and resiliency program for human performance taught through golf that we're looking to take around the country this next year.
Yeah, I remember you because you've walked me through some of that stuff, right? When I'm going through my own thing, there's times where we've been out just at the driving range, right? These mindfulness techniques that you've taught me. Can you talk about where you learned it? You actually went to a clinic or something in Arizona. Was it Arizona?
I went to I went to a 3-day course in Scottsdale, Arizona at Talking Stick through a company called Vision 54. And I also took their online coaching course, and their whole their training program when it comes to golf is human performance. Your human skills matter. Your awareness of your mind and your body and your emotions. And so that's kind of what I teach people to do. Like when I'm watching people struggling, one, I am not a technical golf coach. I have no business talking about the technical side of golf. But when I'm watching people struggling, I'm like, well, what are you thinking while this is going on? Well, I'm thinking don't hit it out of bounds, or I'm thinking swing harder, or some. And you're watching. They're not aware of what's actually going on with them. I played with one of our friends. We played 9 holes one day, and he was struggling hard. And I'm watching him, and I'm like, "Hey, Chris, what's going on with you, dude?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "You line up, and the first thing you start doing is you start gripping that club. I can see all the muscles all the way up into your shoulders, gripping and getting angry as you're starting to swing." And he's like, and then he told me the stuff he was going through at that time, and I'm like, okay, we're going to try a little exercise here. I want you to have a single swing thought, whatever it is. And I just I gave him a couple, and he chose one, and he hit the ball. And so it's about getting out of your own head and being in the moment and focusing on what you want to do, not trying to overdo it.
So how do you think that's applied for you, right? I mean, it's obvious, blue line golf. Well, everybody knows the thin blue line, right? But it's not just for cops, right? I mean, I mean, you're kind of targeting first responders, period.
I would like to work with. I'd work with anyone in the first responder or military field. I chose blue line golf because, I mean, like I've been a sheriff's deputy for over 20 years. I mean, those are my people. Those are who I connect with. I've talked to a firefighter about wanting to do red line golf at one point in time. He wasn't quite in the spot where he wanted to commit to anything like that. And he's like, well, why don't you do it? And I'm like, I can't run red line golf. I'm not a firefighter.
Not a firefighter.
Someone that can step in and do that. Like we can all work together. And I'd love
and make no mistake, you're a first responder, not a second responder. So that's kind of for them to do.
Oh, snap! Harsh.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But so where does that apply? Like, have you seen that? Have you applied that mindfulness? Like, how does that apply to guys like us, guys that have PTSD, guys that deal with, and gals? Like, it's not. I say guys, I'm generalizing, right? People, right? We're dealing with all these decades long of these acute traumas. So how have you been able to apply that to the golf course and blue line golf? Like, I know how you've applied it to me, and it's done wonders. So can you explain maybe some things, like how does that apply? Like, hey, you just came from that one call the night before, and really now you want me to go fucking play the hardest game on earth that I suck at and be pissed off at? Like, are you kidding me?
Well, part of it is like not getting pissed off at it, not having those expectations, and learning to play it where it lies. You get up there, you take your swing, and then once you make contact with the ball and you get your follow through, it's over. There's nothing you can do about it except for start planning your next shot and learning to be in the moment and just taking your next shot and move forward is something that I find that helps people.
Yeah. And I know you've got a bunch of techniques. I know one of the last times you and I were out, it was, you had me focusing, like you said, like, what's your swing thought? For me, it was, I think we found out, it was like, well, it was my grip. It's like, okay, I want you to just grip the shit out of that club. Squeeze that club as hard as you possibly can, and don't do anything else, and just swing it normally. And that was my only thought, was just grip, 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 grip. And then you kind of walked me through, like, okay, now that you got that out of your system, and for me, it was pretty awesome to, because anybody that's ever hit a golf ball, when you hit it good, man, that's the best feeling in the world, right? That beautiful shot, everything about it feels good. And for me, it was like getting all of the crap, all the vomit out of my brain, right? And I used to golf a lot back in the day, 2 to 3 times a week. And I got so competitive with myself that it wasn't fun, because it's just not fun if you're not, if I wasn't golfing good, I hated it. So I didn't golf for more than a decade until I started golfing with you, and I suck worse than I've ever but I have an absolute blast. Like, I don't get pissed. I just have that last round we played, man, it was pouring down. How many times did I fall? 5, 6 times?
Yeah. Well, because you're the only one who golfs in tennis shoes.
Yeah, I was golfing in tennis shoes, right? And I mean, Mitch, when I say fell, I'm talking going down like the grassy knoll, and my feet are above my head, and the wind is knocked out of me. And I'm sitting in front of all these dudes that we work with and a retired sergeant, and they're worried, and I'm laughing so hard. And that was a month ago, and I think I just recuperate like 2 days ago. Like it was so cool, but again, that's what it's supposed to be. For me, that's what Blue Line Golf has done for me, is get out of my own head and just have fun.
Yeah. Well, it's learning to like let things go, and also learning that like, there's certain things you can do to bring yourself back, to get yourself back on track. And then there's sometimes where you just don't have it that day, and that's okay. Yeah, just go ahead and take a break. This summer I was playing with a couple of our more wild friends.
Yeah.
And I was just not doing well. I was like struggling from some work stuff, from some home stuff, and I could not put it together. And I got angrier and angrier and angrier. And then finally our buddy comes over and he goes, hey girl, come over here. I'm like, what? He goes, give me a hug. And he gives me a hug. And he goes, it's okay. I'm like, I know. He goes, and I want you to drink this. And he hands me a bottle of tequila.
And I'm like, is this guy happen to be one of my former recruits?
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
And he's just like, let's change your attitude a little bit. And so an hour later, me and our like 3 of the guys we're playing with all have our shoes off, and we're giggling.
Oh no!
And it was like, you know what? I generally don't drink when I play golf,
right?
But it was like, you know what? Today I don't have it, and I'm just going to lean into it and have a good time.
Have a good time.
Yeah, shoes off, shirts off. It didn't matter. We're just having a good time, and so it's about learning how to do those things more often and keep yourself on track.
And make no mistake. If for anybody that's listening, if you have interest in Blue Line Golf, coming out to the tournaments, Matt is not going to make you take your shirt and shoes off and drink tequila to golf. That's not what it's about.
No, it's not. That was just an epic failure on my golf. That we're just like, you know what,
right.
we're changing paths today.
Yeah. So how do people find Blue Line Golf? How do they get involved with it?
They can send me emails like go to bluelinegolfusa.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram under Blue Line Golf USA. There's ways to contact our organization. Right now we have a league based in Portland that's set up to play year round. The way that I typically set up the leagues is you play once a month based on your own schedule, play whenever you can. You submit your scores online through our app, and then it tallies them up at the end, and we play for Stableford points based on your handicap versus stroke. So we want you to have fun, score good on the good holes, and if you blow up and have a bad hole, don't worry about it, move on, because you're not getting any points, score points on the next one.
Like, in other words, if you have a rainy Brian day, it's okay. It happens.
Oh yeah,
it happens. And Mitch, maybe we can. You're kind of the tech guy in all this. Maybe you can put a link up to Blue Line Golf up there. In the
absolutely.
Below this.
There's going to be a link for you guys.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Well, good deal, Matt. You have anything else you want to talk about, man? We're free game. Oh, you got to think about it. That's scary. I know you. You got so much bullshit in your mind.
Yeah. After 20 years in this career, like we've talked about, like making it to the end of retirement. For me, because I got hired young, at 25 years of service, I'll be 48 years old. And under the pension system at that time, I'd have to do an additional 5 years just to make early retirement. Yeah. And then I'd be 53, and I'd still have to probably work. I'm not going to be set up to be able to retire at 53. And right now, the idea of doing a 30-year career on the road doesn't sound sustainable for me.
No, and that's
the same thing. Like I'm holding my hand to the fire.
Yeah, that's make no mistake. We are all fully aware for anybody that's listening that's not a a state employee or a government employee in the state. Don't get me wrong. We understand that we are very, very spoiled and very, very blessed to be able to fully retire in our early 50s. But please understand that's 20 or 30 years of doing this kind of job. It's very different. But so it sounds to me like you maybe have an exit strategy going on in your brain.
Yeah, I do. And one of the things with these pension programs is like they lock you in, and they're great, except for when it's not great for you to be doing that job anymore. You feel obligated. You have the golden handcuffs on. And on top of that, no one in our line of work teaches you how to sell yourself, how to market yourself, how to use your skills. I mean, like, I never had to write a resume. Like I was in the Police Corps in college. I never had to do any of that stuff. So I don't have any of those skills. And a lot of our friends get hired forget how to do those things if they ever learn. And even if they want to get out, they don't know how.
Yeah.
And so I went back to school a couple of years ago and got a master's in business. And then the world turned upside down during the pandemic when I was looking to get out, and I decided to hold on for a little while longer. And I'm back on the, you know what? It's not going to be sustainable. I'm going to have to work until I'm 60 something anyway. I don't want to keep doing this. It's going to get to be too much. And by the time I realize it's too much, it's going to be far too late. So I'm in the process of applying to graduate school again. And I'm going to be seeking a master's degree in clinical mental health to become a licensed professional counselor. And I want to work primarily with first responders and military veterans.
Yeah,
that's so awesome.
Matt, I do have a couple questions for you. Was there a specific moment or experience in your career that made you realize the importance of mindfulness for officers or deputies?
I don't think I have any specific moments. It's mostly like from when I really started counseling and practicing mindfulness, starting Blue Line Golf. It was a accumulation of all those little experiences, like, oh, this works, I'm going to lean into it.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you maintain your mental health during high pressure assignments, like being on drug team, being on SWAT? And what advice would you give to officers or deputies in that role?
Oh, I'd say don't take yourself too seriously and maintain your humanity and your empathy the best you can.
Yeah, be human.
Yeah, try to be human. Like it's really hard when you work on or with a dope team. I heard it described to me by one of my former SWAT brothers that went on and worked on a dope team. He said that because he had never really worked dope before, he said working with addicts is baffling to him. He's like, it's really hard to see them as people because a normal human, their drives are food, water, shelter, sex, stuff like that to keep them going. But when you're dealing with a hardcore addict that's like living on the street and in a life of crime, their priorities are completely different. They come across as like not human because everything they do revolves around manipulation and more dope. And so maintaining your humanity to be like, no, that's still a person that's like struggling. Yeah, you can really get caught up in that to like not care anymore.
Yeah, because I'm sure, like you and I have worked dope together for years, and I've said this forever. Like I've never, not once, well, one time, I will say I've never met an addict that wants to be an addict, but that's a lie. There was actually one guy that he's like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Meth is the best thing in the world. I love this shit, and I'll never quit." I'm like, whatever, dude. But you know what I mean? It's that human aspect of it. Addicts don't want to be addicts, and you and I have poured resources into people because they're humans, and we see the human aspect of it. And I think the important part of this breaking the silence and not having shielded voices is because of everything that you've gone through in your life, your traumas, right? I mean, holy crap, dude, you're a dad, retired cop. who takes his own life, and then your OIS, and this girl dying in your arms, and I know you. Like, I make no mistake, guys. Like, I know Matt to his core. He knows me to my core, and this is a man that, because of his traumas, he wants to have an outlet for people so that they don't have to, not necessarily not go through traumas, but have some tools in their toolbox to deal with those traumas, so that they're not dealt with in the same manner that he had to deal with them, or that I had to. That's the whole purpose of Mitch and I talking to people about this stuff, is we're all going to have traumas. But if somebody can learn from Matt and his experiences, or assimilate with Matt, like, holy crap, he's onto something there, and that really resonates with me, or with Mitch or me, or whoever else that comes on here and talks about it. And then you take it from your passion of, I mean, you look at the progression of your passion, Matt, of going through all your traumas, all the shit that you've seen for 20 years, and this sucks. I don't want my brothers and sisters to deal with this. So let's do this blue line golf thing. Let's have this outlet. And now you've got this whole pathway of progression that your passion is now like, I'm done with this career. I'm done taking a beating. And now I want to learn and educate myself and go through this program so that I can be the one that becomes these people's counselors to help them out. I mean, that's an amazing path. When you really look at the big picture of it, that's amazing, man. Kudos to you.
Yeah, Matt, you're a warrior.
100%. 100%, dude. Like, even though you guys call me grandpa, you got to understand, like, you're one of the first dudes that even taught me, even when you were a young deputy, right? You were one of the first guys that taught me defensive tactics. You and Scott and Kelly and Jim, Steve, like all the guys back, like all these guys that I've looked up to all these years, and then who I want to emulate as I go through my career, right? And here you are now looking at this path of pulling the plug because you're done getting beat up, and now helping those people that are going to go through the career, and let's face it, they're going to get beat up.
Yeah. I am tired of getting beat up, but I want to kind of fill the second half of my life with like more positive experiences. That we go through this career and we rarely see the positive impacts that we have, because it is like one and done. We make the arrest and we go on to the next day, and we never see what happens. It's very, very seldom that we see the positive outcomes. And I know, Brian, you've had a similar experience, but I arrested a girl multiple times. I mean, just for the sake of the podcast, we'll just call her Grace. Grace had been growing up in a dope house from like 11, 12 years old on, and had been trafficked, and was now in her early 20s. And it was a very, very, very sad situation. And she was just mired in this addiction, and had moved in with her dad, who had a bunch of health problems. And he was really sick. And this was the typical, well, I'm their caretaker. Well, her and her boyfriend were not taking care of him. They turned it into a trap house. Yeah. And we kept working it, and we arrested her. We arrested multiple times, and like nothing was sticking. They kept getting like probation kind of thing. We couldn't really get the problem to stop. And I remember we got the idea to call Adult Protective Services, and we showed up, and we're like, hey, we're here for the old man. Will you let my friends in? And they're like, yeah. And we ended up taking him into protective custody, and we charged her with criminal mistreatment. We charged him with criminal mistreatment, and more or less rescued this guy because he was like in a room dying. And I never heard from her for like over a year and a half. I happened to be driving through her neighborhood. And I was like, oh, hey, I know the street. I haven't been here in a while. I wonder if she's like still in custody or is doing prison time. And there was a firefighter that like lived nearby, and I saw him outside, and I was talking to him, and I'm like, yeah, I haven't seen or heard from Grace in a while. And he's like, yeah, you haven't heard? And I'm like, oh, maybe she's dead or something. Nope, she's sober.
Wow.
She's been sober for over a year. And I'm like, what? You're kidding me. And she's got a job, and she's
nice.
And I'm like, no way. And he's like, it's amazing. And so about 2 days later, I drove back through the neighborhood in the evening, and I saw her walking the dog. And I'm like, and I pulled over like across the street, and I got out, and she sprinted across the street and tackled me and gave me the biggest hug.
It's so awesome.
And she was just like, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You arrested me so many times. You never gave up. And the last time it finally stuck. She had over a year clean. She was managing a hotel, going to school to be like I forget what it was, like in nursing. She's like not going to like nursing school, but it was higher than like a certified nurse assistant, but it wasn't quite an RN either. I forget what it was. And she's like, yeah, I'm a 4.0 student, and I've been clean for over a year. And my boyfriend, same thing, clean for over a year, and has got a job. And I'm like,
oh, him too. Oh, good.
Yeah, it's not the best tool for every situation, but eventually it worked. But like that's like one case in 20 years where like I finally saw a good outcome versus just seeing the same trauma over and over and over again.
And that's what makes it hard. Like we don't get that closure. We just don't. You know what I mean? It's rarely we get the closure. I've got a similar story, and again, first names, and you'll know who they are, but Christina and Jason. I mean, they ran havoc. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would run dope stings on them. They're dealing, they're using, they're dealing, they're using, arrest them over and over and over again. But every time I arrested them, you know, just like we always do, right? We treat them with respect and dignity. We pour resources into them. You have to, man. These are people. And same kind of thing where they finally just had enough. And I can say, I want to say they've probably been sober now for probably close to 6 years. And I'm not even joking. Every year at Christmas, I get, because they were also they also helped me out on some things. So we would talk a lot, right? Work cell phone. So every year around Christmas, man, I get a family picture of the two of them. And now they're, I think, 2 kids. They might even have 3 now. And it's amazing. Amazing. Wow. I mean, it's just, and it's every time it's like, I just want to thank you for actually caring. I just want to thank you for actually giving a shit about us, even though we were causing havoc and doing the things that we're doing, because again, no addict wants to be an addict. Not one. They just don't. You know, they're numbing something. And that's closure, right? But like you said, that's one. That's one.
We don't get near enough of those wins to like kind of balance out all the negative that we see. It's kind of feels like a futile process at time of like especially some of the areas that I work, where today's victim is tomorrow's suspect.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All the time. Yeah. I mean, it's just such a vicious cycle, and it's so easy to get bitter and jaded about it. And it's one thing I can say about you, Matt, is I don't see you, when it comes to the public we serve, I've never seen you be bitter and jaded to the public we serve. We have some days, right? But you still always continue the mission. You're always Charlie Mike and pouring your soul into these people. I mean, so many times of standing by when we're partnered up on, pick a dope case. I mean, pick a theft case for that matter. Everybody thinks all we ever do is chase dope. And I'll tell you right now, you guys can all fuck off. They don't know what they're talking about. And I'll say it now because you guys are fucking idiots. It's like, get off your ass and go do some fucking cop work then, you lazy fucks, but whatever. So yeah, man, it's just awesome to see, man. It's awesome to see how you progressed over these years, coming from the traumas that you've come from and turning that into something like going through whatever doctorate bullshit, more school. You guys are fucking weird in all your college. I can't do it, man. But kudos to you. Like, and now you're going to turn that into helping other people that are dealing with the crap that you've had to deal with for 20 years.
Well, I offered you to come to college with me so we could act like immature, like 20-year-olds again, and be like, whatever, we're in college. It's not weird. You're weird.
I think
you're turning me down.
I think I drove through a college campus once because there was like a kegger there when I was in the Army. And I think took my daughter to a gymnastics meet at college. That's about my college experience. Like I went in the Army 4 days after I graduated high school. That was my path. So
yeah, I think everyone knows that you guys are in a bromance.
Oh, actually,
everyone knows this.
Oh, everybody does. What is it? Dustin always said, man. In briefing, he just sits back and he's like, "It's like watching the movie Step Brothers."
It's adorable.
Constantly.
Oh God. There might have been a few times we actually did karate in the parking lot. I mean, don't judge. Whatever. All right, man. Well, I think with that, man, we wrap it up. Let's, to all you that's listening, man, check out Blue Line Golf. Not just because Matt's my best buddy, but I can tell you from personal experience, I've been out there on the golf course with other guys we work with, and I can see the difference it makes in people. And Matt is absolutely willing to invest in you and pours time in you, and show you some techniques that work. So, Mitch we'll put some links in the body where you guys can go to the website and see what it's all about.
Check it out.
Yeah,
I definitely need to get out on the course with you, Matt.
Well, let's do that soon. How about tomorrow?
Yeah, Matt golfs. Matt's always like, dude, if it's not 8 inches of ice, Matt will golf. He's like, let's go golfing tomorrow. I go, it's 38 degrees and raining. No, I'm gonna sit in my hot tub. I'm golfing.
Yeah, Matt, what you do is incredible, and you're an incredible person, and I appreciate you sharing your story. Brian, I appreciate you driving this session. Both of you guys are incredible human beings. Your stories are important.
Yeah, man. We're kind of a big deal.
We'll get you out on the course, and we'll have a good time.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Right, well, I think that does it for this episode of Shielded Voices. So we've got some pretty awesome guests lined up. And when I say pretty awesome, we've got some people that have been hitting us up from all over the country. I do want to say that just off the first 2 episodes, the people that we've reached has been blown our minds, absolutely blown our minds. I've gotten so many text messages. Man, I had one guy tell me literally that listening to an episode, it saved his life. It absolutely saved his life. He actually described, sitting around with a gun in his lap in his garage while his wife was in the other room. So, Mitch, if you would, give a plug to the resources again, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll how about this? I'll put them in a link. That way you guys can reach out to them. Like First Responders Now, obviously Suicide Crisis Line. But I'll add those numbers into the link. Yeah.
Yep. And my only ask to anybody that's listening, if you're even thinking you want help or need help, know somebody that does. Oh, man, I'm so heartfelt when I say this. I beg you to please take that step, even if it's just talking to a buddy. Just take that step.
Yeah, reach out to us. Reach out to Matt. Reach out to Brian. Reach out to me.
Yep, for sure.
You guys.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this up, and we will. I don't know when we're going to drop another episode. Maybe we're going to try to do like a once a week thing. Who knows? We'll see where this goes.
Yeah, we'll try. All right, guys. You take care.
All right, we'll see you.